right, okay, everybody, hello. It's been a while. I thought today I would show you how I park on non-full coverage projects. So this is Deadpool by Stitch Mania. So this is what I have started to stitch on. As you can see, it's a non-full coverage, and also at the same time, like Deadpool himself is fully stitched, so you will get a good feel of my way of parking in a little bit easier way to see. You will see the benefits when doing big blocks of colors and using this method. So yeah, this series I will not talk about anything but stitching. So if there is some places I don't talk, it's because there's really nothing to say. And sometimes it's better just to see how it works than getting everything explained. So I will try to explain the best I can. First off, I don't follow the usual ways of parking. I stitch from the top down. And as you can see, I have started to do the full width of Deadpool's head. Since this stitched border doesn't have a connection to this motif, so this border doesn't, there's no stitches right above here, it's okay to kind of have two places to work, because these stitches will not affect these stitches at all when it comes to how everything is looking. And my way of parking has mainly been made up by Blitz Stitch. His way of parking, he talks about clean holes, I believe he says. Like you want to come up in a hole that are clean and go down holes that are fuller with stitches. So right here you can see there is 1, 2, 3 stitches in this hole. So this hole you want to go down, and this hole right here has no stitches, so this one you want to come up. This right here has 2 stitches. There you want to come up. He is even more detailed about it. He usually has none to 1 stitch. I can manage with two lengths of floss going down in a hole, so kind of 2 X's made around 1 hole is usually okay. That's just for me to save a little bit more time and not fiddle too much in the stitching. And that's also why I stitch from the top down, is because my stitches goes from the bottom left to top right, from bottom right to top left. So in a way, when I stitch, I always think bottom, bottom, because I always come up in a bottom hole and I go down in a top hole. So then when I stitch top down and never have stitches underneath the stitches I am going to stitch, this kind of goes automatically this way, my way of stitching. Like there's no big thing you have to think about. So I'm gonna zoom in because I'm gonna show you a part of the pattern. It's not much, so it will be a little bit clear. I can't do too much about that. But as you can see, this pink or purple is stitched. So the reason why I haven't done this black line right here is because, as you can see, it will go one stitch to the right, and there I haven't done these red stitches yet. So I will do those red stitches before I can do this black length of stitches. I usually do half a stitch on each stitch going one direction and go back completing the stitch. And this is the black line I was talking about with the red stitch above that isn't stitched. So this red has to be filled in first. So usually when I stitch, I know that as long as I'm on the left side, I usually never go a stitch out to the right, but it's always okay to go one stitch further to the left. And the same thing when I'm on the right side, it's okay to go one stitch to the right, but not to the left, because then you will start to get stitches that will go into the picture where there haven't been stitches above. A personal preference for myself is that I could, when I stitched this red, you can see I parked it right here, I could have just continued stitch it down, because on the left side it never went more to the left here when it's in the middle, or further out to the right. So it goes inwards, which makes it so I could have just finished stitching this with my method. But a personal preference for me, if there is stitches that are just straight down, like you do the rows just right underneath, I get this line going on the back. I can show you that when I will go down here to do this stitch, there is a line going from here to here. Like there is a straight line right there. And if I do that for like one row down isn't an issue, but if I do that further down and these stitches were not here, when I would come to do these black stitches, I would have issues with that line going straight down here to do this stitch, to come up and do this stitch, because that line from here to there would kind of be in the way. So my personal preference is, if I'm gonna work rows that are going straight down, I want to do the stitches on the left first. So that's why I have done these black stitches first, and now I will do these red stitches. So let's get to stitching. And with parking, you kind of have to make it your own way, what you like. And just find something that works for you. I'm stitching with a long needle. I got as a present some petite needles and I really love them, and I immediately can feel the difference when stitching with the normal size needles. So yeah, So as you can see, I will do this stitch, even though with if you would follow the blitz stitch method, and Karen the needlebug, she also did for a while like diagonal stitching. She wouldn't have done these stitches yet because when you're doing this stitch, as I said, there is two crosses that are going into that stitch, kind of filling up the hole a little bit. But as I said, I really don't care too much about it because when I now come, the reason is when you come up now, you kind of will push those two lengths of floss, you kind of push them a little bit up when you go up that hole. But the thing is, when I do the stitch right underneath, I am going down that hole again and kind of pulling them down, making them lay nice and straight. You can't see it too much on this because I'm stitching with one strand on 22 count. But especially if you're stitching and you have a little bit of denser stitching, like 2 strands of floss on 20 count, you really can see that easily. And still with just one length, I still see it. I still see a difference, and I think my stitches look a lot neater when doing it this way. And one of the big advantages to stitching it this way is that, hold on a second. Okay, I'm back. My son, I heard him was outside and was afraid he would come in, but my husband fixed it, so it's okay. So yeah, I just finished that with a pin stitch. If you're wondering how I'm doing that, I show it in my A to C Stitch With Me's. I made A to C Stitch With Me that I named how to start and end floss from the front, which shows it, I feel I show it really well how you do that. So when you didn't see the full finish of the pin stitch here, you can always go there to see. And I hope my head isn't in the way. It will take a little bit of adjustment because I don't have the shear I usually use when I'm filming. I'm using the shear on my gaming shear to have my tripod on, and it's a little bit high, so I kind of can't really see if you're in frame. So this will be a test. If I'm not too happy about how this ends up looking in the end, you will still see this video, but going forward I will need to take one of the dining chairs downstairs and use those when I'm filming to have my tripod on. But in a way, having it's higher up now, so in a way it's nice because it doesn't get too much in the way for my face when I'm stitching, but at the same time I can't really see where I am. As I said, in the frame while stitching, so I'm just hoping you can see everything well. So as I said, like when I did this stitch right here, I had to come up in this hole, and that kind of will move those lengths of floss coming down or up the hole, depending on how you look at it, but it connects to this hole. They kind of will be pushed up when you're stitching. That's just the way it is. But now I'm going down, so I'm kind of pushing them back down, so they still will look nice. And that's why I'm not too bothered about having 2 stitches already in one hole, because of the fact I'm stitching top to bottom. Because I know the next row I will kind of make those stitches lay nice the next time. And since I'm never trailing, or never, like, I do make exceptions to my rules, but my rule says I never trail like into the picture where there isn't stitches above. So I know that the next row there will be stitches to do because I haven't, like, I'm now doing these stitches. Of course, there will always be exceptions, and sometimes if it's just 1 or 2 stitch, I will sometimes do those stitches, saving a little bit of time, a little bit of fiddling, and still not make too much of a difference, because that one or 2 time exception isn't going to make the whole picture look awful in my view. Like, and I'm not judging anybody else's stitching, it's just that's how I judge my own stitching. And usually if I see somebody else's stitching, I can't tell that they have gone cross country or not when I look at the finished product. But me, while stitching, I enjoy the process of stitching, and then I enjoy my stitching looking nice while I am stitching. So yeah, I know the 3 feet rule, you won't see it, you won't notice it at all. That kind of doesn't matter to me, because the important part isn't the finished product, it's the process of stitching. Like, I have to enjoy it right now stitching. So yeah. So now I will do this line. And now, since I went not straight underneath, but one to the right, to kind of go diagonally to the right, it's not an issue to do this line, even though I haven't done these to the left. So just get these stitches done, and then I will explain the next section. So park it here. No, not there. It's going to go right underneath. But now on this row, the red will go to include this stitch. And you can see I don't have the stitches above, so I'm not doing this row because I don't have these stitches done. So I need to first do these stitches before I will do this red again. So that's why I'm parking it. And my way of parking, if I'm stitching on Ada, hard hanger like this is, or over 2 on linen, I always go up in the top, in the bottom middle section. So kind of where you're not stitching. And that has to do when I am coming over here with the floss that is going to be here, it's black. So when I'm coming to do this stitch, there isn't a floss parked in this hole, making it so I have to fiddle with like laying this red floss to the side to be able to do this stitch. So parking it here in the middle, it's not going to interrupt me stitching from the left side. So that's why I park in the middle. You can't really do that when stitching over 1, but I'm not stitching. I am stitching over 1 now, but stitching over 1 on even weave. You can't really do that without piercing that one strand of floss, which is more trouble than I have found. It's more trouble than useful in my mind. So, but going up the middle here on Hardanger or Ada is not an issue, and it's actually even easier on even weave or linen when stitching over 2, because then the hole is right there without an issue. And again, if you're watching my A to Z stitch with me's, I do explain that there. I don't have that marked down in any video, so you kind of just have to watch them. Yeah, to see. So this next section, there is going to be black on all these rows. And when I finish this stitch right here, so if like this would be the last length of the stitch right here, what I would do to come down here, because I always want to go to the leftmost, is I would have to do half a pin stitch in this square right here, and then on the back you would then have the floss on the back will go to the middle to here. So, but since I know everything here is going to be black, and with my method, I know trailing upwards is just as easy as just stitching the lines. If you're trailing downwards, so if I would go from here and I would just do half stitches on this line and going up again, that makes some of the stitches look a little bit wonky, but I know going upwards, trailing away upwards, and when I mean trailing, I just do the half stitches going up the rows. And you will see that in a second. I know the stitches will still look just as good as when I just do row by row. So as a rule for myself, I am always allowed to trail upwards. So instead of having to make the half pin stitch and then come up in this hole to make it look good, instead I will just start stitching here, which is the left edge of everything in this section, and I will do the half stitches. And as you can see now, soon I will do this half stitch, and then I will go up and do this half stitch, and this stitch, this half stitch still look good, and this will still look good. Yes, there will be one length of floss in this hole, but again, when I come back down crossing the stitches, I will have the floss at the end go down that hole tightening the stitches to the back, which makes them look much neater and nicer in my mind. So trailed all the way to the top. So then I will do this row. And I will go back and cross the stitches when I'm all to the other end. So I believe this is called the Danish method, when you're doing half of a stitch one way and crosses the stitches on the way back. The English method is when you do one stitch at a time. So for me, I have tried one stitch at a time. I do it on some projects, but I really don't like it that much. It's just easier for me. Like now, I have no problem stitching and talking at the same time, because I'm just completing the stitches. I don't need to use a lot of brain power to just go back and cross those stitches. Like, I don't need to count anything. I don't need to remember which way to do the first leg of the stitch, because everyone is already done on the first leg. I just need to go back and cross everything. So now when I'm done with this row, I come up here, I do this row, half stitches. So yeah, it doesn't take much brain power, and I don't need to count much, because I usually will count when going to the right, just doing the first leg of the stitch in a row. That's when I will count. So when I'm turning around, going back, finishing the X's, you don't need to count. You don't need to do anything special. Like, you just go back and finish the X's, which when you have stitched for as long as I have, that kind of is it's like breathing. Like, it's something you do without having to think about it. Your brain just does it. That's the best way to explain it. So that's actually my trick when filming videos. I know a lot of people wonder, how are you able to stitch and talk at the same time? And this will happen when I'm filming, when I am on Zoom, on virtual stitchers, stitching online with other people. I usually try to wait to talk until I have a link to go back. I have got some training in stitching and talking and doing other things than just going back. So I kind of can also talk now. So yeah, but that's just how I like it. That's it's really nice with my illness. Like, people have sometimes wondered how I'm able to do these big blocks of colors and not get bored. And the thing is, when I do it like this, it's not a problem, because if my illness is bad, I can always, like, I just have to focus until I get to this point where I have to end, kind of have to turn and go back on the line, and then I don't need to think anymore. So the rest of the time my brain gets some rest, and that's nice. And if I'm feeling pretty good, then I'm usually watching TV or something. And big blocks of color means I can watch a show where I have to pay more attention to what's actually happening in the show. Because there are some TV shows I kind of want to see a lot what's happening. Not everything is explained as much. And then there is other TV shows that you can basically just sit and listen to the whole thing and you will not have missed a thing as long as you just listen. So yeah, now I will do this row, and after this row I will just continue as I have done, going down row by row. Like now the trailing off is done. And I can stitch the way I usually do. And as you will see, trailing upwards is not a problem. Upwards and to the right. I should say if I would have to trail to the left, it would be an issue. One, because then there usually is some stitches I have not done over already stitches. So yeah, that's why I didn't remember to say upwards to the right, because that's you won't get anything else with the way I'm stitching unless you make exceptions. So yeah. As you can see now, I'm going down in each of these holes, coming back, so that one stitch where I trailed off and kind of the half stitch kind of got pushed up a little bit. Well, now soon so right here, that's the stitch. I can see right now, yes I do, I can see it looks a little bit too, it doesn't look quite right because it got pushed up when I did this half stitch right here trailing upwards. But now I'm going down that stitch and that gets tightened down again. So suddenly the stitch looks different. It looks much better. And when stitching, we're our own worst enemies. But as I said, I enjoy stitching when the stitches look nice. So for me, I would rather use a little bit longer time on a piece to stitch it, because then I enjoy the way I stitch. Because using the short version for me just means I won't like the process of stitching, and that's not good at all. So, and at the end here, I wanted to show you a little bonus. When you have this zigzag border or one stitch every other stitch kind of a thing, You can meet that in other designs, especially if there's shading involved and stuff like that. So the way I do these is that I will stitch on the diagonal, because when going up, it's really not a big problem, because this stitch is going to bend over this way, so this stitch will still look good. It won't be elongated. I don't like elongated stitches, and what I mean by that is if I were to jump up here and do this stitch now, when I went down there, you can see that stitch is kind of elongated because it trails that way. It doesn't bend around the hole when stitching, which it does when I go and do this stitch. So this is what I do. I will go diagonally up one direction, and if it now were two different colors of floss, I will now park this floss right here, and then I would take my second color and stitch this stitch, this stitch, this stitch, and park it here. Or I would stitch from the bottom up, depending on where I had parked the floss. It really doesn't matter if you go up or down, as long as you go diagonally. So then say I would go down, and then I would park it over here, and then I will go take this one again and stitch. So kind of, and then I will stitch this one down. And again, if there was a second color that kind of needed to be filled in, so if you have every other color with two different colors, you can use this method going up and down without too much issues. So, but since I don't have a second color, I can just go over here and then stitch up. And it doesn't matter how thick this every other stitch is, the border. It can be 4 stitches in the width, it can be 2 stitches, 3 stitches, like it doesn't matter, because when you do this method, if it was 4 stitches, you would just do the 4th stitch diagonally going up before going to the right and go down again. So this is a way I really like to use when stitching every other color, which happens a lot when I'm stitching my epic Pokemon. So in my epic Pokemon, this is a technique you will see a lot of the time. And the thing is, like, the reason I can do this stitch even though there isn't a stitch here is because there isn't supposed to be a stitch here. And if there was supposed to be a stitch there, as I said, then I would do these stitches first, park that color over here, and then do these stitches, so there would be a stitch right here when I came up. So the stitches will still look nice, it will still look good, and you usually, with a little bit of just seeing how the pattern goes, you usually can end up coming back at the top with your floss if you have like, if now the border would be like not every other, but would be just one big black line. I could now easily just continue doing that line with half stitching going to the right and then back again, crossing the stitches. So that's a little bonus at the end there. So yeah, that's the very basic way I stitch my progress. And I kind of feel I rushed into this because I saw when stitching this pattern that it would be perfect to explain how my way of parking works, because there is enough blocks of colors and not too much confetti. Because immediately when you get confetti, everything will look more complicated. But this basic method is the method I always use, and I use it even if it's confetti heavy. So if it's confetti heavy, sometimes I will have a row where I'm just doing one stitch at a time on the whole row before doing the next one. But the benefits of doing that is I don't usually make mistakes. The time I make mistakes if I deviate from my rules. Then I will make mistakes and it always bite me in the butt. So I almost never ever make mistakes stitching this way if I follow my rules. And if I do end up making a mistake, it usually isn't that much to frog. Like, of course, here it would be a lot to frog because I do the half stitch one way and then go back. So if the mistake was I had one stitch too much over here, I would have to frog all those half stitches over here, remove the first leg of this stitch, and then I could go back and finish those X's again. But that kind of frogging I would have no matter what way I was stitching the project, because of I'm doing the Danish method. But like, if the mistake was here in the gray, which is only 2 stitches, I usually would notice that mistake 1 or 2 rows, so it would mean I only had to frog maximum of 4 stitches in this case before I could go and restitch those stitches again. So mistakes are detected quickly, so there's less to frog when you do a mistake. That's one of the big benefits of stitching this way. Also, when I stitch top down, just following the pattern instead of keeping inside a 10 by 10 block or 20 block or a page, it means I don't get lines. The lines I get are the natural lines of the pattern. So on the back right here, you can see the color goes just the natural way down. So yes, you will get a little bit of extra bulk right here in the gray, especially when you stitch the stitches that go straight underneath. You get that line I talked about, so it gets a little bit bulky. But on the front, the only thing that will do is it will give more dimension to the picture if you suddenly can see those lines on the back showing to the front. So I have no real block by block lines. I have no page by page lines. So it's a really good way. of stitching, I feel. So, and often I will have several colors of the same floss. Often I will have one length of black for this section, I will have one length of black for this section, and I will have one length of black for this section. And over here, that again will be divided into two. So a lot of the time I will sit with 4 or 5 strands of the same color throughout the piece, the project. But like that's no big problem. And when this section and this section suddenly combines, if they combine, I usually will make a diagonal to the right. So for each line, I would, on the next line, I would then start stitching here, and then here, and then here, and then here, and so on and so forth until this length was done. And the black color I would have over here, I will then afterward do this stitch, then this and this stitch, then this and this and this stitch, and just fill in the black I didn't do with this. So you kind of get that diagonal going. And what that does is that I don't get a line suddenly in the middle of the black when combining two colors. Because the one stitch in usually makes less of an impact on the back of the fabric. So that was what I had for you today. I don't know when I will be back next time with this series. Because one of the big problems is I have to film on my phone. I have no good way of using my iPad while filming, which means all my full coverage projects, where you usually could see more confetti heavy ways of stitching this parking method, don't go together, because I need my pattern to be able to stitch. But if I use the camera to film, I don't have my pattern. So that's mostly what's holding me back right now. But I do hope I can find a solution in the future, and this can be like a monthly series that will go along. And as I am doing this series, I will also show the other methods of stitching that you can do. So the one with 10 by 10 blocks, like I will show you that method, and I will also show you how, if I'm using that method, how I am doing it. And I will try and remember to explain the benefits of doing it that way and not this way, and so on and so forth. So yeah, when it comes to parking, I think I am going to touch all the different ways of parking I know of. What you won't see most likely is me doing the X's another way. If you do your crosses another way, you just have to adjust this method to work for you. So kind of, if you would go from the first leg will go from the bottom and the second leg will go from the top, then you kind of like your start, both of your start would be here on the left side of that square. So most likely the best method would be to start over to the right and kind of stitch your way from the right to the left, top to down. Since the first leg is at the bottom, you then always want to start from the top down. If your first leg is from the top, you would want to start from the bottom to the top. So depending on how you're doing your stitch is depending on how you would do this method. So yeah, that's again what I had for you today. I hope to see you soon, and I hope it wasn't too bad of an explanation, because I jumped into this on a whim and I used the 10-15 minutes I needed to recharge my phone to just write a few notes down, which I almost haven't looked at all. So I hope I have said everything that I wrote down, and that the most important parts I managed to tell you guys. So, but this will also be a series where you will see a lot of stitching and not a lot of talking, mainly when going forward, because it's easier just to show you how I'm stitching and you paying attention to how I stitch than me explaining it all the time. But I am going to try and explain why I do things the way I do, like when I trailed up this black and down, like why I did that and why I can trail up, but I don't like to trail downwards, and so on and so forth. So hopefully I will see you in a month's time, depending on if I can find a good solution for my filming. If not, you will see this series again when it shows up again. So if you like this series, please hit the like button, follow my channel, and because then I know this is something you like, this is something you appreciate. You can even leave a comment saying that, because that makes it so that I know this is something you want to see. Because if this isn't something you want to see, then there's no reason for me to use the time and energy it takes to film and edit and do all that stuff if you don't want to watch it. But if you do want to watch it and you like this and want to see more of it, remember to support it so I know this is something you want to see more of. So hopefully this is something you like and we can continue this series, and I will see you later. Goodbye.